Coming to you from Music City,
Nashville, Tennessee.
the definitive arts and entertainment podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Turn It On. My name is Michael J. Welcome to the first episode of what hopefully will be an ongoing series of these things. Most of you probably don't know who the fuck I am. I'm not even sure I know who I am yet, but if I do my job correctly and you're interested enough to keep listening here, you might just get to know me pretty well. And more importantly, I hope you'll get to know the people I'm planning on talking to. That's my real goal here. I actually have a pretty exciting lineup of guests already, and the list just keeps getting longer by the day. So I'll keep you posted as that continues to grow and develop. I'm new at this. So there, I said it. Cat's out of the bag, secret's out. So bear with me because I'm just going to keep throwing a lot of shit at the wall to see what sticks. And I'm hoping in time that this thing will develop its own unique voice. And I guess I'm confident enough in my abilities to know that as I do this some more, I'll grow and learn. The show will grow. There's going to be a lot of ideas that don't work, and as in anything. But as long as you guys bear with me and bear in mind that that's the case, we shouldn't have any problems. The impetus for this podcast, or the idea to start it, actually came from a few different places. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention guys like Mark Maron of the WTF podcast and Chris Hardwick of The Nerdist, because both of those guys and their shows have been a huge influence on my decision to start this whole thing. And as far as I'm concerned, they're the godfathers of podcasting. So long and the short of it is, my idea was to start a music-based podcast to talk to musicians, producers, artists, and really performers of any kind. I'm not going to limit this to just music. If an actor or actress or somebody else wants to come on, I'm not going to tell them no. The show is called Turn It On simply because it's something that all performers do when they're getting ready to entertain. I don't know how to make it any clearer than that, but it's pretty simple. So to give you a bit of background on myself, I'm a lifetime musician originally from Rochester, New York. I write songs, I sing, I play guitar, bass, piano, and I've even produced and mixed a bunch of records for both myself and some other artists over the years. And I've been at this a long time. I've been at this since 1987. So I moved here to Nashville almost 2 years ago, and I've been a sideman for a few country artists. And, it's a different hat for me to wear. I started out as the guy in my first band, Exploding Boy, that I was in for 13 years. I was the singer-songwriter, the front man, the guy out front. And I reached a point in my life where I had to make a decision. I had to decide to sort of diversify, and that's when I moved to Nashville, I decided I was going to be I was going to try to focus on writing more and focus on trying to be to support the guy or girl out front rather than being the person out front, and I'm really pleased with that decision. It's worked out pretty well so far. My first little bit here in Nashville, within 2 months I was playing with an artist named Chuck Wicks, and I got to play the Grand Ole Opry a few times. I got to play the Ryman, which huge thrills for me. Never thought I'd ever be doing that kind of thing. So being that I'm a sideman now, there's a lot of these folks here in town. And I was watching the CMA Awards not too long ago. I was at a bar with a friend of mine. And I have a few friends who were playing on the show with some prominent country acts. And I was getting excited to see my buddies on TV. But as the show progressed, I started to notice that the only people who were actually correctly lit were the main artists. All the side men and side women were completely in shadows. And, I guess I realized it's not a huge deal in the big scheme of things, but the more I thought about it, the more it pissed me off. And I just found myself getting more and more annoyed as the show progressed. And I started thinking about, just how talented all these people are and how much of a disservice it was to them and their importance in the big music equation here in Nashville and elsewhere to keep them obscured by not lighting them. And I'm not sure, I guess I get why the producers of the show did it, but to me, even if those people were slightly lit. It wouldn't have confused anybody. I think the big mistake that the music industry makes time and time again is that it assumes that the audience is stupid, and they're not. That's when the big light bulb kind of went off for me about this podcast. I decided to do it right then and there. If nothing else, to make sure that some of these people that you might not know get a little bit of attention and maybe some attention paid to their stories, which might honestly be more interesting than a 19 or 20-year-old artist who gets signed before he or she's even had a single day on the road. This isn't a bitter thing, and believe me, I certainly won't turn my back on someone like Jason Aldean if he wants to be on the show. But I think you get the idea where I'm coming from here. Anyway, enough about all that. I don't want to make this intro too much about me, although I may already be too late for that. Today on the show is a great friend of mine, a guy named Chris NIx. He's a guitar mastermind, a genius, mad scientist. Chris is one of the finest all-around musicians I've ever had the pleasure of working with. We met each other when we were both living in Gainesville, Florida a while ago, and we played together for many years prior to both of us ending up here in Nashville. Chris and I have had a very brotherly relationship through the years. We've had some issues as well, much like brothers do, and we actually got into an honest-to-goodness fight on stage one night in front of a bar full of people. It's uncomfortable to think about being at odds with one of my closest friends like that, but it happened. Shit happened. And I'm not proud of it, but unfortunately, we didn't speak for a couple of years, and we mentioned it a little bit in our talk. We gloss over it. It wasn't a good time for either one of us, and both of us have a lot of love and respect for one another. But Chris ended up moving to Nashville here several years before I did, and somehow we managed to reconnect and bury the hatchet, which ultimately paved the way for me to move and work here in Tennessee. And, Chris is a really intelligent guy, and we have this kind of shared sense of humor that it sometimes we lose people, and I'm not sure what that is, and I'm not trying to say that that puts us above anyone else, but sometimes when we're around people, we have to temper that, just because it can rub people the wrong way, or usually they leave us to ourselves, laughing by ourselves off in a corner somewhere. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this talk with Chris. I certainly did, and I appreciate you guys tuning in to Turn It On. And let's go to my talk now with Chris NIx. We've been friends for a long time, but I don't think I really ever grilled you on the beginnings of how you started playing guitar and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? It's weird because at first I did get 2 guitar lessons. Told my mom and dad that I wanted to play guitar, and mom bought me a Global acoustic guitar. They did. I honestly don't know who paid for it, but it was like a little $15 Sears acoustic. And went to take 2 guitar lessons. Took the first one, and the guy tried to make me play right-handed, and I'm left-handed, and that really didn't go over well. And went back to the next one, and just it was a miserable experience. And so gave up on guitar lessons and had that little Global for a while, and that's what I learned a bunch of Beatles songs on. And
what was the first thing that really blew your mind that made you say, I have to play electric guitar?
There is actually a specific event. It was not long after that. An uncle of mine took me to see a midnight showing of The Song Remains the Same at National Hills Theater. It was a Friday night, midnight. The other it was 2 theaters. One was showing Rocky Horror Picture Show, and the other one was playing, Song Remains the Same. And, watching Page with an electric guitar in front of 20,000 people at Madison Square Garden with stacks of Marshalls, makes a pretty strong impression when you're 7.
You got the bug, right?
Yeah. So that was really it. And of course, I immediately, started cutting grass. That's how I bought everything, was cutting grass. So I took some grass money out and spent $8 on Zeppelin 4.
Yeah, I did the same thing, man. It was fun. Well, it's funny because Yeah, I used to cut the neighbors' lawns, and I was saving up for a Stratocaster. That's what I want. I just wanted a Fender Strat, so it was mow the lawn, $20, $20, $20, $20, and before you knew it, and they were cheap. They were
20.
cheap.
You got 20? I got $5.
Yeah. Oh, really?
$5. And this was in neighborhoods with like 1 acre yards.
Oh, yeah.
So it was.
I had some very wealthy neighbors apparently. So
Yeah.
Was there a moment when, for those of the people listening, I mean, you're a fantastic guitar player, but was there a moment when you realized you had a true affinity for this, that you knew this is something that I'm going to be really good at?
I don't know if I ever really thought of it like that as much as I did notice after a while, because I had other friends who were interested in music that were my age, that were all getting into it at the same time. I mean, my first band, if you want to call it that, was me and a group of other kids doing a Kiss band. Mm-hmm. We'd do a little Kiss thing, and we'd have, there was an old beat up platform in my backyard that used to be for the lawnmower and a shed, and we'd give these shows, and neighborhood girls would come over, and we'd kind of pretend to play Kiss songs and stuff. But I was the only one that could actually figure out how to play the stuff,
right?
And everybody else would sort of pretend, and yeah, I'm the drummer, but they couldn't really actually do it.
So it was when people around you started reacting, kind of maybe they like.
Well, no, I actually just started noticing that I could play. I could sit down with a record and figure it out. Like I could match the note that I was hearing on the record to the guitar, and and figure out where it was and organize it in a way. Actually, the funny thing is, I thought that one day I noticed that if I took a melody I'd learned off of a record and put the notes in different order, that all of a sudden there was a pattern. The notes formed a pattern on the neck.
Right.
And I was like, holy crap. I've just discovered this mysterious thing that no one knows about.
Yeah.
And then, like a little while later, I'm looking through Guitar Player, and there's this article about scales. I'm like, shit, everybody knows about this. This is no big deal. But, so that was kind of it. I mean, it was just, I could learn stuff. And, that was really the biggest thing with me was the ears. I could pick up stuff pretty quick.
Sure.
Pretty young. And the other guys I knew didn't notice some of the things that I did,
Yeah.
And as you know, I'm like that. And so it's...
Oh, yes, I know. Yes, I know that.
Yeah, so it was just one of those things. It never really dawned on me that I was good for my age, until... I went out and started playing in public, which was a couple of years later,
right.
And I was like, 11, 12, would go out and play a gig or something, and all of a sudden grown-ups are coming up saying, man,
yeah.
You're a little kid. Play,
How many siblings do you have? I know you have a sister.
I have a sister. I have two sisters. I have one who's a year and a half younger than me, and then I have a half-brother who is 10 years younger than me, and then I have a baby half-sister who is 20 years younger.
Are they musical at all, or do they have any?
No,
not at all. Not at all.
Nope. Nobody else. I had a great-grandfather who was a violin, mandolin player, virtuoso guy. So, but other than that, no one else in my family.
Really?
Well,
your parents aren't musical either?
No. I had a cousin who played trombone in high school. I mean, that's about it. Another cousin that took piano lessons for a while. When we were kids, but. And so in my mind, she was a pianist, but she was not really a pianist. Right. She just had a piano.
Okay.
And, I remember going over to their house and playing the piano and kind of figuring stuff out on it. But
so you're the black sheep of the family.
I was the weirdo. I was definitely the weirdo. Yeah.
So how long after you started kind of playing? Did you start a band right away? Did you find some neighborhood kids to get together with, or did you?
Yeah. We started bands before we could do anything.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's how it worked. Well, let's do a band. Well, I guess we got to figure out who's going to play what. And who's going to. I had a band before I played guitar. I was a drummer.
Okay.
I literally had a Mickey Mouse drum set. You always see the little Mickey Mouse. It literally had Mickey Mouse on the drum head. Yeah.
And how old were you when the first band kind of started coming together? Where you actually really doing stuff?
Really started playing with people probably like 8, 9.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah,
so,
and I started playing with grown-ups. The first school bands were, early grade school, middle school with, people that were my age. I remember when I was in Davidson Fine Arts, which was like 7th grade, something like that. There were a couple of guys that I played with there. We played a school dance, but I'd also played with grown-ups at that point, and but that was the thing. Playing with grown-ups in clubs was more of a novelty. Here's this kid, playing guitar. But when I played with my friends, it was kind of, our band.
Yeah,
we were in charge. It wasn't, you weren't going in going, oh, don't be mad at me if I missed this note,
right.
Mr.
So it was like a street gang, basically.
Yeah.
That's I've heard it referred to that way. So.
No, that's really what it was. It was, and a couple of those guys ended up continuing to play, when they grew up and stuff, which was cool. So.
I'm curious to figure out. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I guess I write from a certain point of view when I'm writing lyrics and all that kind of thing. And I know you deal primarily in instrumental kind of stuff. So I'm curious to know how your brain works in that way. Like what inspires you and what moves you to create in the way that you do.
You know me well enough. I tend to pretty hard on myself. I had relatively high standards about anything I do, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's great or that it comes out good. Of course. Yeah, you're the same way.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing because I bring that up because I'm not one of those people. That's not to be mistaken for a person who walks around hating myself because I'm going to turn this off because I think I suck or because what I do sucks. I mean, I write music because I like the music I write. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if I write something, it's because I want to hear it.
Right.
Like to me, it's like, I want to hear something that does this. Well, I should make something that does that,
Right.
And,
so is it more of does it start from an intellectual place or does it start from like,
no, never.
Okay.
No, it's intuitive. It's stuff that's in my head. It's, it's something I'm listening to in my brain, but I can't place where it's from. And by that, I mean, I've never heard it before, you know? And or I'll be playing the guitar and a certain sound inspires, idea. Like all of a sudden you can hear where that sound is taking you and you go with it, know, and you follow the road that it goes down.
Do you ever wake up with melodies or
stuff like that? Yeah. It's funny because there's not really one way. There is no one. It's that, it's waking up with stuff. It's walking around hearing things in your head. My iPhone is filled with thousands of things of me just singing things into it, or if I'm in a hotel, grab a quick guitar and unplugged, just play it in there so you can hear it real quick, just so I don't forget it, because I'm really bad about that. Like I'll come up with thousands of ideas a day, but most of them go off into the air. Just forget about it. But no, it's never intellectual. It's more of a gut thing. When I'm finished with something, when I'm done putting it together and I've got it recorded, if it doesn't move me, then it's gone.
Right. Yeah. And the only reason I ask this is because sometimes for me it starts with I need a song that's like this, or a song that's like that.
Oh, I can do,
that's what I mean by the intellectual kind of thing.
That's another thing. Yeah, like I said, it all of them. All the different approaches that you hear about. They're all there as far as I'm concerned. It's it's funny. It's the way I look at it is. People like Frank Zappa, those were real people. Mm-hmm. They really did do all of that work. Oh, yeah. They really did have that. That giant body of work was really created by them. And it was because they were open to every possible angle that you can take to create something.
Right.
Be it, here's something that someone you're playing with does, and then go, hey, I've got 50 ideas that just sprung off of that one little snare drum hit you just did. Hang out for a second. I'll be right back. Yeah. Scribble, scribble, scribble.
Yeah.
Or, give me a second and whip out the guitar and pull something together. It's that. And then there's also hey, someone just called and they want a tune that's, they need some music for a thing that's, that sounds like waves crashing on the shore, but it's not the sound of waves crashing on the shore. Right, you need to give them that vibe. Okay, I can do that. Because it's all. It's funny. It's that making up music for imaginary movies. It's really what it is.
So do you ever get inspiration watching something and like?
Yeah. It's tough. It's a tough call. I'm weird because I like 100% of everything music is. every style of music that exists, I'm into. I absolutely love it. But I only actually enjoy about 1% of any given style.
Right.
So I have the attention span of a gnat when it comes to styles. I'm not a devotee of Latin jazz, but there are there are things in Latin jazz that I love.
Right.
And then some of it I don't ever want to hear again.
Yeah.
Same with country or pop or
Sure.
rock or metal or whatever. Rap stuff. It's really so. To your question, I have a lot of stuff that I put together that's all over the map stylistically. And it's just because, like I said before, if I want to hear something and it doesn't exist, I'm like, well, I'll just make it. You know?
Yeah.
So scoring something, there isn't any one scoring composer, like film composer. There are things that have blown me away. I mean, I remember the Tangerine Dream soundtrack to Legend.
Oh,
it's just fantastic.
That's great. Yeah.
Always liked Danny Elfman. I love what Hans Zimmer's doing. I thought the Man of Steel score was amazing. Really moving, real simple. Yeah, I mean, there are a handful of people that, John Williams. I mean, I was a Star Wars nut, so, you gotta give it up for John. I mean, that was, his style of thing is interesting because it's really different from what Zimmer does, And I love that. I love both approaches. They're really obvious. This is how you're supposed to feel during this music, during this scene.
Right.
The music is going to tell you how you're supposed to feel. And then, I like the other stuff that's, a little more ambiguous, So it really, I like a lot of different things like that.
I'm curious to find out a little bit of the chronology. I mean, I've been there, but for again, for anybody who's listening, how does a guy from Augusta, Georgia, end up in Gainesville, Florida, and then Nashville, Tennessee? I know some of this, but so. Well,
I was living in Augusta, and did the stuff with my little trio, and we that I'm trying to remember myself. I ended up doing a bunch of stuff. I'd kind of done as much as you could see that I'd done as much as I was going to do with the weird way I was trying to approach it in Augusta, because there, particularly at the time, you had to be a cover band to really get out and do your own shows, and so that was why the opening for People thing was actually a pretty, accidentally a really savvy move,
right?
Because it was like, well, I can go out and play my own music, and they're not going to tell me no, because who cares? You're playing for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever, and you're not the draw. No one's going to leave, if you get up and suck. But so I was able to use the cred from doing those things, and because again, those types of players draw the type of people that were into the thing that we were doing. So I was able to kind of go out and do that for a bit. And but after a while, with different manager things and record label crap, all that stuff, I got really burned out. And so
there was a period in there where you didn't play at all, prior to, I guess, when we
Gainesville.
met.
Well, when I moved, that was it. I got really burned out in Augusta and was like, I can't do this, So I took a job in Gainesville managing an apartment complex.
So how did that? I mean, did you just look up job listings and you saw something in Gainesville? And
No, it was through my dad. one of his best friends owned a couple of properties around, like in Augusta and down in Florida and stuff, and they were looking for a property manager down there.
Okay.
And I'd done some work. I'm a musician, which means that I also know how to build houses and plumb and run wiring.
So you're a plumber. You plumb.
I plumb. Yeah, I plumb. I am plumb.
And you have to tell me the name of the place you manage, because I know this, but it's hysterical.
Oh, Camelot. Yeah.
Camelot.
Camelot.
Okay.
And it's actually shaped like a castle. And it was a nice place, actually.
I always wanted this when I lived in Gainesville. I always wanted to live there, just so when people asked me where I lived, I could say I live at Camelot.
Camelot, of course. Yeah. Well, yeah, and it was a cool place. And when I lived there, moved down, and it was a 2-bedroom apartment, and so one was my bedroom, and the other was where I kept my gear. What I kept, and so I set up a little recording studio in there, like a little demo studio. At the time it was ADATs and stuff like that. So, and that I really just focused. I really just wrote more than anything, and and worked. I worked and wrote, and then I'd go play basketball. I mean, that was I was really not into getting out and dealing with gigs and club owners and musicians. It really wasn't.
There wasn't
really
a heck of a lot going on. Well, I mean, there was a lot going on there, but maybe not in the. There was a lot of like punk music and a lot of like underground. Well, that was another
thing.
Kind
Especially
of
there, it was really kind of a bad thing if you could play. It really was. It was. It was. So I just didn't even bother. I mean, it was. I remember actually. When I started thinking there was hope for that place was a friend of mine called me up and said, hey, there's this Zappa group called Bogus Pump playing down at the Florida Theater tonight, which is down on University. Mm-hmm. And it was some kind of a jazz festival that weekend. And so we go down to see Bogus Pump. And, for the record, they were phenomenal. They were from Tampa, I think, and were just fantastic. It was this huge band. I mean, it was probably 10, 15 pieces, horns, and, the whole thing. And they all did really, really, really great renditions of the Zapp stuff. So, but that was the closing part of the night. The cool thing was the band that opened for them was called What It Is. And they came out, and I remember thinking, I want to know who that drummer is, because I could play with that guy. He was the first drummer I'd heard, since my band. Sure. That I was like, yeah, that's my thing,
Right.
So I thought, okay, well, that file that in the back of your head. There's a guy. I don't even know if they live here or whatever, but that they're obviously regional or something. But there's someone that I'm interested. That would be cool. Didn't know who he was, any of that stuff. And then, so after finding out that I really didn't like being called at 3 a.m. because someone's toilet was running or whatever, I decided to get back into music, sort of, So I started working at a music store. And through the guy that owned the music store, I met Stan Lynch from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Yeah. And Jeff Sims was very kind to introduce us. And,
Jeff's great.
He was really cool.
I remember. Myself. We met in Gainesville, Florida. Played together for a lot of years, and the drummer you're referencing is Tom Hurst, obviously. And I remember I'd been in bands for years, or in a band for about 13 years called Exploding Boy. And when I was in Gainesville, I was doing solo acoustic stuff because there was nobody to play with. And I remember asking around to people, who are the guys here? If I want to put a band together, who are the best guys in town? And I remember, I think it was, I forget who told me it, but somebody said, oh, you want Tom Hurst for drums and Chris NIx on the guitar, but you'll never get those guys. They're too expensive. And
yeah. That's I just snorted.
Well, that's
that was. But yeah, well, the funny thing is, so how I met Tom was I'm working at the store, and and I talked to Stan a little bit about it's like, man, he's like, so next, why aren't you getting out and playing? I'm like, well, there's really no one to play with around here.
Right.
I'm sure there were many fine musicians I just didn't know,
sure.
But it wasn't anything that, really kind of caught my interest. And I said, it's tough, tough finding finding a decent drummer, And what I was really getting at was, Stan, come on, let's do a band.
Right, yeah.
But which we kind of talked about, but he would always find a way to be busy. Or, he was actually interested. We really did talk about doing something at one point, and, which would have been cool, but, circumstances being what they became, it was just one of those things. So anyway, one day he calls me up and he's like, "Nix, I found your drummer. Tall, good-looking boy named, Tom Hurst, and,
it's a great Stan Lynch impression.
Yeah, thanks. And so what's funny is that I'd heard Tom's name from a couple other people at that point, and by then I was kind of like, well, he can't be all that. Forget that guy. I'm not gonna bother with this. There was almost like a what's the word? Contrarian kind of attitude. It's almost like,
there's no way.
I'm not. And but I one day, not long after that, I got a call from Tom. Just one Saturday morning, I was at work, and he called and said, "Hey, man, this is Tom, and are you free tonight to do a gig?" And I said, "Yeah. You want to send the set list?" He said, Nah. We'll wing it. I'm like, okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So we go down, and it was me and Tom, and the bass player was Angel Roman, and the singer was Greg Ema. And let me tell you, son, that was a badass band. Like, just that one night, we didn't know what we were playing. Greg would, kind of like what we do with you. Greg would start, living for the city, and we'd jump in, and, it was like, holy crap,
well,
we should do this.
The craziest thing is, we met back in, God, it was like 90s, no, it's like early 2000s sometime.
Like 2001 or something
2001,
like that.
2002.
Yeah.
I'm currently in Nashville, Tennessee now, too, and it's crazy to me. You mentioned these names, and all the coincidences and all the... I owe a great deal of being here in Nashville now to you and Tom for kicking my ass and making me, like, you got to move here. You got to move here. Because I was down in Gainesville languishing as well, that kind of thing. But it's crazy. You mentioned I did some work with Stan Lynch as well. Jeff Sims, kind of helped facilitate a lot of that. Did you ever stop and think of that? Like, how the fuck did we get here?
Yeah. It's a weird, life is like that. It's a weird thing that the little series of clicks that pop into place that have to happen to end up where you end up. That's always fascinating.
Well, and the only reason I met you is because I accidentally got placed with Tom Hurst on a gig because Greg Ema, the other guy you mentioned, Greg couldn't do a gig at Christmas time one year and said, I was with this guy, Tom Hurst, and I'd heard Tom's name all over the place. And he and I drove to Orlando from Gainesville, which is about a 2-hour drive, and had just met each other. Again, same kind of thing. We didn't know what we were going to play. Yeah, it was pretty clear from the minute you played anything that, even Greg, but especially you and Tom and I had that whatever that is, whatever that chemistry thing is that it just clicks. What is your take on what do you think that is? Is that just human chemistry, or is that something bigger?
All the above. I think it's because it is something that's rare. It's a combination of the musicians involved with the chemistry in question have to have a similar level of experience, and they have to have a similar level of imagination, a similar type of imagination on top of that. With us, specifically with us, it was the sense of humor. We all kind of had a similar sense of humor. We're all more or less the same experience level. And as different as we were, we all could hear the same things happening at the same time. And, we'd kind of know what our role in the next piece to the recipe of that musical event needed to be. Taste in music is part of it, but I don't know that that's necessarily a required ingredient. I think it's more of just I don't know, man. It's a unique personality thing where just personalities click, and when they do, everyone kind of sees the same thing and hears the same thing at the same time.
I've been pretty lucky a couple times now. I mean, the first band I was in, I had that with those guys as well, where we just knew what was going on. And then with you and Tom, it was the same thing. And we've both now played with a bunch of different people, and, I can get in a room and play with a bunch of guys, and it'll sound fine and it'll be great. But there is something very special that happens when you have that chemistry thing, and some people may not even ever get to experience that, or may have it on a smaller level. But it blows my mind to still think about that, and to think again to think of the whole symbiotic thing that has gone on with all of us, where we've all ended up here. Maybe Tom is the catalyst for that. Would you say that, because he moved here first?
Yeah, sure. I know I moved up because he was pulling and Liz was pushing.
Right.
She was ready to leave Florida because she'd grown up there. And
this is Liz, your wife.
Yeah,
right?
This is my wife, Liz. Yeah, she said, listen, it's closer to, my son lives with his mom in Atlanta, which was 6.5 hours from Gainesville. And so that was always, a long trip to, pick him up and see him, which we did a lot.
Yeah.
So this was much closer, and which that was kind of the final thing for me. It was like, oh, well, that makes it easy.
Now, when did you move here again? Because
2010.
We had a couple years where we didn't speak.
Yeah.
Which is a really unfortunate thing. Yeah. But it was
it was 2010.
drunken misunderstanding, stupid thing.
Yeah, that was stupid.
But it's
funny.
Well, it's funny. It's funny looking back at it. But it's I guess that's a testament to how passionately we each
chew at life.
Well, maybe
honestly,
something like that.
That's a lot of it. I think I don't think that people can get as angry at each other as some people do. Unless there's unless both people involved are just hungry in life in general. And that I think both of us have that. Tom's the same way. It's that.
Do you think that plays into the chemistry
absolutely.
as well?
Yeah, I think so too. Because in fact, if you think about it, it makes sense. If you are always trying to devour as much life as you can, and you play music, then that means when you're playing music, then you're trying to devour living in that moment. Like for me, when I'm playing, all of my intellect and all of whatever I know goes out the window, and I'm just this. I'm just playing.
Right.
That's all I'm doing. I don't know anything else. I am not anything else. So, but that passion is still the same. Right. The same passionate person that's, whatever, obsessive about the color of his, walls. It's the same person, but now with a blank slate and a guitar. Right. And so you're chewing at the bit to get into the meat of whatever it is you're doing. And I think if you're playing with other people that are the same way, then I'm sure that's a huge part of that recipe.
Well, the three of us are definitely quite intense people, or can be at times. So you moved here.
Yeah, it was 2010.
2010.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your experience, your first, maybe the first couple shitty years that you lived here.
Well, because honestly, it's not as shitty as some people have had it. I've been really, really lucky because at this point it's been just over 4 years, which seems pretty astounding because I've been able to do a lot of stuff in that time, and pretty happy with where I am in my life.
Nashville, the shitty years,
the shitty years. Yeah, no, I mean the first year it was hilarious because the way we had to move was cute.
I want to know. I want to hear that story because that's
so. I was renting a house from a friend of mine who was moving away.
Angel Roman,
the bass player,
guy,
earlier.
Yeah, which another one of those little coincidental kind of things.
So he was moving to Austin and didn't want to sell his house, so I rented his house from him, and it worked out. It was he was moving exactly when I was moving up, and. We have a house in Florida, and she had a job down there that was pretty good. So it was, the plan was for her to put in applications for jobs up here, and I would just move into Angel's place by myself. And so I did, with no furniture. I had a futon. without a frame, just a futon on the floor, a computer, and a pile of guitars and some amps, and that was it, And the rest of the house was totally empty. And so that was about 9 months. And it was all through the winter. Like, I moved up in August, and she didn't get up here until, March? Something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, that whole winter, the funniest thing was that was, to this point, it's still the coldest, snowiest, most miserable winter that has been in this town since I've lived here. Yeah. And, so yeah, it was horrible because
it was turn the amps on to heat up the room.
Yeah, actually, I did do that. I actually did do that. But no, I mean, it was cool. I mean, I came up and I knew a couple of people. I knew Tom and a handful of other people that kind of steered me to some things, and met people. Got invited to go out and do some gigs and stuff. And yeah, so I mean, it really did pick up steam pretty quickly. Relative, especially for someone, my age and, whatever, you know what I mean? It was pretty cool. So it worked out pretty good.
It still had to be, I mean, I know for me, it was a huge leap of like, I knew people. I mean, I knew that I knew you and Tom here, and I knew that there were people that you would introduce me to quickly. And that's that's a lot of the way this town works. It's just,
it's really introducing. It really is. And I mean, it's rare that you talk to someone who moved here by themselves, somehow miraculously heard about an audition somewhere, walked in an audition for it, got that gig, and now they're rolling. That doesn't really happen,
right?
So it worked out pretty good. I mean, it was really dramatic. I don't know, dramatic. That's very dramatic. A little overly dramatic.
I'm getting really mad.
But no, it was. It's not heavy, but it was definitely a big decision. It was a big leap, and we still own the house in Florida. We rent it out,
right.
And hopefully those people stay there forever. But because it was also right around the time, it was just after the market crash, so it wasn't like we were going to sell that house and actually not lose our asses. So we held on to that, rented it out. We got lucky because she came up, and after about 9 months, we did really well being apart, only because she's amazing, and we know who we are. So. But after 9 months, and we'd only seen each other maybe 4 times, grand total of about 3 weeks total, in time.
Right.
So I just called her one night and said, you know what? Come work at Lowe's.
Sure.
I mean, the applications she'd put in several applications to some places up here that the types of jobs that she was looking for, the processes with which they choose their employees tend to be long, because they go through a lot of applicants and they go through a lot of interviews and all that kind of thing. So there were some things in the fire already for her, but they weren't baked. And so she literally moved up, and like I flew down there, and we rented a truck, threw everything that was left in the house into the truck, and I drove the truck and she drove her car, which was also packed to the rim, and we were here and moved it into that house I was living in. And she worked at Lowe's for, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, and then she got a call from Vanderbilt that to do an interview, and they took her. So now she's doing great with that. And so I mean, it's really, really for both of us. Honestly, if I wanted to move away from Nashville, I'd probably have to get a divorce, because she freaking loves it here.
I mean, obviously, I guess anybody who has a significant other doing what we do, I mean, you're touring quite a bit now. So have you found it challenging to try and keep that connection strong all the time, or what? Maybe I should ask, what challenges?
No, it's really not. I think it's different for everybody, and we're pretty unique. I think we are. I don't know. Maybe we're just like everybody else, but we love each other. She's my girl. I'm her boy.
Right.
So I mean, and we both know we're done looking.
Sure. Sure. Well, I think
And,
that's unique, because I know plenty of people in music who it doesn't sound that good.
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm single now, probably
yeah.
by and large, because I chose to do this.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we actually we know enough that we know enough about each other to know if I go out for if I'm out for a long run or whatever, that we're just going to be thrilled to death to see each other when it's over.
Sure.
And we talk every day, and and even that, I'm not. Everybody on the bus always thinks I'm weird because I'm not the one calling my wife every 5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
She's not calling me, and I don't have to report it. And it's, because she knows I'm at work.
Yeah.
I know she's at work during the day. You know what I mean? And
Right.
she goes to bed relatively early. So, I mean, it's, and I'm old enough that, and to be honest, quite comfortable with who I am enough that, all the opportunities that one is presented with when one is touring,
Right.
that those things aren't intriguing for me anymore.
Yeah. She seems to have a pretty fundamental understanding of the fact that this is who you are, too. And that's another thing I wanted to touch on is my father always told me, you don't choose music, it chooses you. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that, or do you think that it's,
I never decided I wanted to be a musician. Like I said, I was, from day one, I just was.
Yeah.
I was beating on stuff. I was trying to play, I say my first guitar was when I was 7, but honestly, there's a picture of me with a guitar on Christmas Day when I was like 3.
Yeah.
I mean, I always had something that I was plinking on or,
Right.
playing, like, little plastic xylophones and little drums and, my aunt's piano. And, I was always doing something. And it wasn't a choice. It was just a compulsion. Like, I just did it.
Yeah.
It was there. And
some people will never get that. Will never understand that. I mean,
but, it's that whole thing of, people talk about, particularly, people that, teenagers or whatever, when your girlfriend's always, oh, you love your guitar more than me. And it's like, well, no, you're looking at the wrong thing. I don't love you any less or any more than my guitar because I don't love my guitar.
Right.
My guitar is me. I am my guitar. It's like saying that I love my lung more than I love you. Right. I mean, if you want to get technical about it, yeah.
Yeah.
I love my lung a lot more than you because I'm going to need it for the rest of my life.
Right.
And I don't really trust you, teenage girl, to be around for the rest of my life, but
I bet there's a lot of guys and maybe girls in this town that probably have a similar story to that,
Sure,
or probably have a similar, like, oh, you chose music over me, or you chose.
No, it's not a matter of, I mean, that's the thing. It's a mistake to think that it's a choice. It's funny. Growing up, your parents always tell you, have a fallback plan. Mm-hmm. If you're gonna, I dropped out of high school,
right?
Well, if you're gonna drop out of high school, you better have what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're gonna play music. You're gonna drop out of high school. You need to have a backup plan because your odds of making it are 1 billion to 1.
Sure,
and which is true. But the funny thing is, I've done other jobs,
right?
And I always end up falling back on music. And I've made more money playing music than doing stuff that, everyday normal stuff that people think is an everyday normal job. I've done all that crap.
Yeah. The way I always looked at that whenever somebody told me that was, if you have a plan B, your plan A is not.
Again, I think it's sort of a unique thing. I think it's different for everybody. I really don't think that certain platitudes are they're easy to say, but I don't think people really think about all of the details, for a unique individual. I don't think that you can take an individual and sum up their possible future.
It's
what I mean?
It's really easy.
It's really
easy to make blanket statements and on anything really. But I agree with that.
like I said earlier, generally speaking, I hate generalizations. I really do. I mean, those kind of things don't apply to everybody. I mean, I know so many different people here that have, their story is, some people, their story is real similar, but really different. You know what I mean? It's really strange. It's a strange life, Michael J., as you know.
I do know, yeah.
So, I don't know. I really think that the plan A, plan B thing, I always knew that when I grew up, as long as I could play music and write music and had something to record stuff, and even if it was a little 4-track cassette deck, I was thrilled when I got my first 4-track, because to me it's like, oh, okay, I get this in a little another tape deck or whatever, and I can overdub until I'm dead, and I'll happily do that, because now I can get it. It's funny you talk about the music chooses you. I've often wondered if music isn't actually demon possession. Because whenever I compose something, whenever I write something and I finally get it recorded, I do feel as though I've been exorcised. I feel like Max von Sydow should be like drawing a cross into my forehead or something, because it's I got the demons out. With that, by finishing that last overdub, that demon's out of me. Now I've got to start working on the next one. I think I'm just riddled with demons, and that's what it is.
I love that you just referenced The Exorcist. It's amazing. It's amazing. So one of my teachers in high school was actually in that movie.
Really?
He's the priest at the end. Father O'Malley is the priest at the end of The Exorcist. That's the only guy left, basically, standing brooding over that big staircase where the guy fell down and died. Yeah. That's an interesting side note.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about the scoring thing, like the movie thing. I'll always love movies, almost as much as I love music. I mean, to me, movies are any kind of video thing. I love art. I mean, when I was in fine art school, I wasn't actually there for music. I was there for painting and drawing and stuff. Right. And
see, I'm finding more. I'm actually recognizing more things too, because I'm a huge film buff as well. Everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, I mean, and that to me it's all interesting. Like people ask about, whenever you talk to someone that's interested in guitar and they share this, the same passion as you, they'll ask, so what were your influences? Who did you, well, Stanley Kubrick was a huge influence on me. Obviously he's not a guitar player. He may have been. For all we know, he could have been, serious bad motherfucker.
You never know.
You would think he would have been, actually. But, he kind of resembled Leslie West, now that I think about it. But, I mean, it's, to me, my influences, this is going to sound so fucking pretentious, but my influences aren't just guitar players. Like, guitar players are really way down the list on, like, actual influences as an artist, as a player of music, as a, constructor of,
sure,
demon stuff. It's to me, it's not even so much influences. I always kind of bristle when someone says, oh, you must be influenced by, or who are your influence. That the word influence, it suggests that you are being pushed in a direction by somebody, and I really don't react well to that notion. I tend to like to think of what I do as my thing. It's not reactionary. I don't listen to something and go, I'm not doing that. I'm doing the opposite of that. That's just as much, that's just as bad to me as, trying to be the next Eddie Van Halen, I mean, they're kind of the same. Sure. They're just different sides of the same coin. To me, it's, I've listened to everything that I could get my hands on. I've watched everything. I've looked at every painting I could find, I mean, all of those things are inspirational. I like the word inspirational because that means that you are, as an artist, you're inspired, you're pushed to be. The people that I think are influences are only influences in the sense that I look at someone like Stanley Kubrick or Frank Zappa and go, well, now there's someone who became the best Frank Zappa that Frank Zappa could possibly be.
Right.
That Stanley Kubrick became the best Stanley Kubrick he could possibly be.
That,
and then I'm thinking, okay, so you, third person Chris NIx, what are you doing? You know, are you as good as you could be at being who you are?
Sure.
You know, and the answer is every day I wake up, I'm like, no, not yet.
It's a tough thing to do.
Just never. Yeah, I don't know that I'll ever be as good as I could be, because I know it's in there, and I try, but I don't always succeed.
Right.
You know?
Do you find it harder? Like, I mean, was there a moment in time in your life where you felt like you were able to get in the zone, quote unquote, super easy? Because like for me personally, when I was younger, I could just turn it on, and I find that I or maybe it's because my standards have gotten higher the longer I've done it.
Yeah. But
I find it a lot harder now to put myself in the zone.
I don't have any trouble doing it if there are no distractions. Like if I come in here and lock the doors, I'm in the zone immediately. I don't have a problem if I'm on stage and the sound is there and there's not, the monitors aren't weird or whatever, and the artists or whomever, if it's my gig, if it's Power Triplets or, something else, if there's not a problem and I'm not distracted, then I can be in the zone immediately.
Right.
Like that's one thing that I actually, the one thing that I have absolute confidence in with me is the idea well. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like at any point you can say, hey, you got an idea for this? Yep, I do.
Right.
Like even if I didn't before the moment you asked me, I will the instant you ask me, because I don't know why. I'm possessed with demons, obviously.
Right.
I don't know where it comes from or whatever it is, but it happens. But no, I've never, the zone thing, man, I mean, even when I'm not having a great night, if I close my eyes and don't worry about anything, and I'm not distracted by something, I can go in the zone anytime.
Uh-huh.
That's really never been a problem. The problem is actually setting up the circumstances in which the zone can be trifled with.
Exactly.
It's making sure the door is locked to the studio, making sure the phone's turned off like I didn't do earlier.
It's only a podcast, doesn't matter.
Yeah, so it's making sure that the circumstances are optimal, and so that's actually a large part of your or at least my daily life pursuit is the constant. Aside from working on playing, practicing and writing and stuff, the other thing, the rest of my time is actually, really thinking about this, it's funny, but the rest of my day is spent optimizing the circumstances in which I can have my zone. Okay, that's really, I mean, like all this, hanging these things tonight, it's
there can be a lot of noise in life, a lot of other things.
It really can. Well, we just moved into this place, and we've been here for a month and a half, and we're still kind of getting settled, and it's just because been on the road and doing all this other stuff, and so those kind of things can distract. But whenever I actually pick up a guitar to play, that's not a problem.
Right.
My chops aren't always there. I don't always feel. Well, I say they're not always there. I can generally count on my chops as chops, but the amount of focus I have to pay attention to varies.
Sure.
That's one thing, for sure. Like that does vary depending on circumstances. Like my fingers always work great, but sometimes I have to use my brain more than I want, to make it happen,
Yeah.
And from outward appearances, you might see one night when I think I'm really working hard and it looks no different from watching me on a night where in my mind it's just all flowing.
Well, I've told you that on a million different occasions. You always come off stage thinking you sucked, and I'm like, you're fucking great, man.
To me, sucking it's like I don't mind making mistakes if it's my gig. Now, if I'm playing for someone else and your job is to not make a mistake, that's easy because you're just playing the notes that are prescribed for you. But when if it's a thing where I'm doing my thing and I'm allowed to do my thing, I don't mind jumping off a cliff and missing some notes here and there as long as I jumped off the cliff. Like it actually pisses me off if I don't jump off the cliff. If I'm just playing it safe on something like that, then But but that's when I feel like I suck, is when I'm having to work my mind more than I want to for the ideas. Like that does happen. You know, it is and it's not even the ideas, it's the hands, like getting my mind and my hands to connect, because ideas are always there, but you've got to have a clear channel between your soul and your mind and your hands and all the stuff. I mean, there are all those little things. So some nights it's more work because you have to, you know, get your mind to quiet. You know, just like locking the door, it's the same thing. You've got to quiet your brain so that everything connects a little better.
Some fun questions. What's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you on the road since you've been here? And just the funniest, most bizarre thing that's happened to you? Is there one?
I don't really know.
Because there has to be. Everybody's got shit.
Yeah, there are a lot of them.
The funniest thing without incriminating anybody.
Well, that's the thing. It's funny. Like a lot of things pop in, and you're like, well, nope, and I can't even say that because it's easy to connect.
Connect the dots.
Circumstantial evidence within the story and to put it together who that was and whatnot. You know what I mean? No, it really is. So it's hard to say. I don't really know. I mean, there have been a lot of them. Well, I'll tell you. Some of the more interesting things was like when we were in St. Croix when Chuck. And you decided to stay in the hotel because you were hungover.
Oh, okay. Well, so you went to fill everybody, and so we played with an artist, both of us, with a guy named Chuck NIx, and Chuck was doing some acoustic dates down in St. Croix, and basically said, "Hey, you guys want to go to St. Croix?" And I think we waited about 1.2 seconds and went, "Yeah, fuck yeah, let's go." So we spent about 4 or 5 days? 4 days.
It felt
like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
3-4 days down in St. Croix, which was a blast. But
one day you weren't feeling great, and that morning
it was relationship problems, Chris. Let's just be honest.
Well, I was trying to be.
No, I don't fucking care. It's all gonna. I'm putting it all out there.
Yeah.
Girlfriend, soon to be ex. This all ties
Big
in with
surprise. Michael's having girlfriend drama. So instead of going out on the jungle tour with me in the Jeep Wrangler, he's going to sit in the hotel and. I went on a jungle tour in a Jeep Wrangler and came across beer drinking pigs. And that was a trip because that is not something you expect. You take a can of beer
it's like the
to this
Inquisition.
pig stall, and these giant freaking hogs jump up on this wall, and they're waiting for that beer, and you put it in their mouth, and they crush it and hold their heads up and. Drink
I'm
all this
sorry
beer.
I missed that.
So
next time I go,
cool.
I'm gonna
that was
go
pretty
see
cool.
the beer
So
drinking
stuff
pigs.
like that. The funny things. The things that amuse me or make me really laugh are not things that I can really talk about because it's. It's not just incriminating other people; it's incriminating me. I don't want people to think, God, that guy would laugh at that. kind of sick tool is he? You know.
Listen, this is the forum for you to either reveal or conceal whatever you want. Okay, well, how about what was your favorite? What's been your favorite experience here since you've been on the road? I mean, what are you most proud of? Like, what did you have a moment ever at any of those gigs and any of those places that you went, holy fuck?
Oh yeah, there've been a bunch of them. You know, I mean, it's you know, you never get over playing the Opry.
Right.
You know, I grew up in the South. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, and my grandmother and I used to watch Hee Haw every Saturday night. You know, and you know, Roy Clark and Chet Atkins doing the $1 Million Band and all that stuff. So, you know, the Opry thing, that was pretty heavy. You know, I remember the first time doing it, and I you know, I remember the last time. You know, and I'm doing it again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things.
It's pretty
that,
magical.
Yeah, and
yeah.
that never goes away.
Right.
You know, even though you can get into a groove of, you know, I remember when you came and did your first. That was probably my 10th or something. And so I already knew like everybody and knew where to go and all that stuff. And you're like, man, you really got the style. I'm like, yeah, but it's still
right.
You know, it's just still fucking cool.
I'm glad. I consider myself lucky for getting to do it 3 times in the year. I try to tell, you know, some of my relatives and friends that have asked about it. I'm like, you don't realize how quick it is. It's you 2 songs, you're on, you're off, and if it weren't for the fact that I've done it 3 times, I would have thought I never did it because it's so quick, and you're so like by the time you're done one song, you're like your brain's going, holy, I'm at the Grand Ole Opry. This is incredible, and then you're done, and then next thing you know, guys are handing you your gear and you're walking out the door. Well, I think we're almost. I think we're at an hour, almost or a little over an hour.
Okay,
might be a good place to kind of wrap it up. But do you want to talk a little bit about the Power Triplets before we? And maybe we could like tag a song on at the end. That way, you know, anybody who's not familiar with your playing can kind of get an idea.
Okay.
And you can, that kind of thing. But so you've got the one record out, Ta-Da, right?
Yeah.
And is there a new record coming out that you're working on right now?
I've got piles of stuff to do. With us moving into the new place, and you know, we're all working and busy. It's kind of taken a while to even begin on it. We've actually recorded a handful of tracks that are really cool. We just I've got a pile of other stuff for us to do, and you know, we're actually one of the reasons that, you know, we picked this house was so that I could put this studio together. So now we have a real place. It was, you know, when I moved up here, I lost my studio because it was still in Florida. So I had some gear, but we were renting a house that was a house. It wasn't a studio. So now I can actually, you know how I am. It has to be right, or I can't do it. You know? I don't know what to do with this. You know, so is that. So now it's right, and we can get in here and work. And so that's the idea. Is the beginning of this year coming. You know, in January, we're gonna, you know, really
cool.
You know, lay the wood to it. So cool. I'm really excited about that. Actually,
awesome.
That's gonna be fun.
Well, thanks for talking to me, man. I appreciate that. It's we'll see how this thing. We'll see how it all works.
Yeah, I haven't been that introspective ever. I think I'm going to go and, you know, talk to somebody else about them. I'm not that fond of me.
I wanted to watch you squirm. That's why.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks for
awesome, dude.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for being the wonderful human being that you are.
I try.
I love you.
I love you too. The debut record from the Power Triplets, Ta-Da, Ta-Da, featuring Chris NIx on guitar, Trip Walmsley on the bass, and Tom Hurst on drums, is available now on iTunes and many, many other online digital music retailers. Buy it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. That's it. That's all. Episode 1 done in the can. I really hope you guys enjoyed that talk as much as I did, and many more to come. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Michael J. Until next time, always remember to turn it on.